welcome to the directing module. And before we start talking about how to direct a film, first let's talk about what a director is and what they do. So a director is a person who is in charge of overseeing all parts of the film. So they are in charge of overseeing the cinematographers, the editing, the actors, and interpreting the script, which is truly the most important part of their job. A director is in charge of all parts of the film, so directing needs to be familiar with all parts of the filmmaking process, but they do not need to be a master at any of those processes, because that is why they have a team that helps them. So they don't need to know everything about editing or everything about cinematography, because they'll have a specific teams to help with that. They just need to be familiar so that they can oversee them and create a vision for the film. Additionally, there is no right way to direct. A director applies their own knowledge and their own creative mindset to each film that they work on, so they each follow a different process, and they are just in charge of overseeing that script comes to life based on the vision that they have. So with these tasks in mind, now let's talk about the process of directing. So generally, a film follows a certain order. So you first start with pre-production. So this is where the film is written and planned. Then you go into production, which is where the film is recorded. And then you finally go into post-production, which is where the film is edited and presented to the audience. The director generally follows this process and oversees the film completely from the moment that it is written to the moment that it is fully edited and presented to the public. So now that you know this, let's talk through the director's role in these different areas. So in terms of pre-production, they're heavily involved once they get the script. So typically a director is given the script that they have to interpret, but they also do write their own scripts. So once a script is made, the director must become extremely familiar with the script. They need to understand every word that is written in the script and the vision in order to make every single word come to life. So they must determine what is the tone of the film. So the tone is the way that the film feels, or that it's going to make the audience feel. What is the theme of the film? So the theme is the different ideas that are presented throughout the film. So fear, sacrifice of a greater good, and the list could go on. And then they must finally determine what are some motifs in the film. So motifs are repeated elements in the film. For example, you may notice that a villain in a film always wears red when they come onto the scene. Or you may notice that in a film that a scene is supposed to be very scary, the light will always come down in every single scary scene. With these questions in mind, and once they figure out those three things, the director can make sure that these elements are represented in the film correctly, and that they are able to manipulate those elements in order to make their vision come to life. Once they have a vision for everything that went into the script, then they can move into film planning. So now the exact order of these steps that I'm about to tell you can truly change from director to director, but they always need to go through all of these in order to plan a film in whatever order they choose. So they first need to find a location. So a location is where a film is going to happen, and they must determine that based on what is written on the script. While looking for a location, a director needs to keep in mind what a location could look like and not what it is. With set designing or even lighting or props, you can truly make any location look whatever you want it to be. And while doing this, the directors need to keep in mind also the lighting of that location and what extra lighting they might need in order to work in there. Once they figure out the lighting, then they move into planning cinematography. So typically a director will develop a shooting script with their photographers, and they don't always have to do this, but they tend to do this because these shooting scripts include everything that goes into each scene of the film. So they include the camera, the angle movements, the character interactions, the wardrobe, the lighting, the props, everything that you need in order to make a scene function. And they also need to look at what the different characters are supposed to feel, the different things that they need to talk about, so that they can interpret it and use the different camera angles in order to get those feelings across. The director, while doing this, should use the different compositional techniques such as rule of thirds, bird's eye view, warp's eye view, leading lines, and repetition so that they can get the most out of each scene. They should also be using different camera angles. They could be doing a close-up shot, a long shot, a medium shot, an establishing shot, and you will notice in a film they tend to mix these up. And they also need to keep in mind the different camera movements that they want throughout the film. Do they want sally, truck, pan, tilt, or roll? And they should include this in their shooting script in order to describe how each scene should look and what they want to get out of it. During this filmmaking planning, directors should also think about blocking and acting. So blocking is deciding how characters will be set in a scene and how they are going to be moving throughout the scene, so that they know where to place their cameras, how the lighting is going to look, what kind of movements they can do. And acting is the actions and emotions that the characters are going to portray. The director must come up with all of these plans in order to decide how each character is going to live in the scene and if they're actually portraying what was written on the script. Once they do this, they also must decide the wardrobes, the props, and the sets. So the director will work with a set of designers, wardrobe designers, and prop managers in order to create the sets, wardrobes, and props that are going to be used throughout the whole film in order to make sure that those words that were on that script that they were given comes to life. Then they must also determine the schedule. So the director needs to set up a schedule for filming. What scenes are going to be recorded first, which ones are going to be recorded last, and they don't actually have to follow the order that the scenes were written in. It truly depends on the characters, the props you're using, and what's going to happen in the scene that determines the order that the scenes are filmed in. For example, you may have a film that ends with somebody coming out of a pool and just like getting dry, and then they're back to normal. So you would not want to put your character into a pool right away because it will take a very long time to wait until they are dry again and they are ready to film that last scene. So if the film needs to end with them after coming out of a pool being completely dry, you would film that first. So that somewhere along the middle or even last, you would film that scene of where they are in a pool. So you don't need to wait for anything else. And once the film is actually planned and ready with all of these different components, then the film moves into production. So in production, the director oversees that the plans actually go into action. So everything that they planned is actually being done on set. And a majority of details should be planned before anybody even steps on the set, so they are ready to roll. Since the plans are done, the director makes sure that all of them are coming together. This sounds very simple, but managing the cinematographers, the audio technicians, and light technicians, and the actors can actually be very complicated. The director works to make sure that all of the different parts come together to create the vision for each scene, so that everything they wrote into those shooting scripts are actually coming to life. Once they are done filming, they move into post-production. So once the director is done with the film, they hand all of the footage over to an editor. And the editing team will actually create a rough cut of the film and give this to the director in order to get feedback. After the feedback has been incorporated into the rough cut, the director and the editor will actually meet in order to sit down and go through each scene to make sure that the changes that the director proposed were actually done and that each scene looks perfect in the way they envisioned it. For your film, you will actually be the writer, the director, and the editor. So you can check your vision while you're working as you're filming to make sure that everything that you set out for your film is actually being done. After the editing is done, the film is completely done and the director's job is over. You will notice that a lot of the job of the director is done before the film is done on set, but they still oversee everything from the moment that script is written to the moment the film is completely edited and shown to the public. So for your film, make sure to plan out your scenes very carefully and use your plan to follow your vision while actually recording your film. And as you're filming, don't be afraid to make decisions on the spot. You may have written something that as you're filming doesn't really work, and you may need to change the story, and that is okay. Those are the type of decisions that directors need to make on the spot. So if there's anything as you're filming that you need to change, just go for it and follow the vision that you set out for your film. If you have any questions with this lesson, feel free to email us, and I'll see you soon.